Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Tony's Tiny Tours. For episode 2 I've decided to pick on a theme that seemed quite popular and is something that I have a hell of a lot of in this region, and that is World War II air bases. In this episode I'm ably assisted by a Triumph Tiger 900 GT Pro, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about that bike as we go along. And behind me is our starting point, which is ANDREWSFIELD. This is an airfield that's very local to me and it seemed like a good place to start, and there are a few notable stories about this particular airfield. Obviously things are tricky at the moment with the COVID-19 situation, so many of these places are not going to be open, and there's many that I'm not going to go into and I'm just going to film from a side. We've got a really nice jet over there. I'm not sure what it is. I'm not up on my planes. I think it might be a Lightning, but I'll find out and put a note on the screen, but I'm sure somebody will be able to tell me what that is. Anyway. Currently it's a local flying club with a small grass strip, but originally there were 3 concrete runways here. This in actual fact was the first US airfield built in the UK in World War II, and construction started in 1942 when they cleared some 25 acres of mature woodland and also completely flattened a local farm which I think was called Muchmore's Farm, and they flew B-17 bombers from this site. There's not much evidence of the site here from World War II. There's a few outbuildings you can see from old maps, and you can see the outline still on Google Earth of where the runways used to be. Originally the airfield was called Great Sailing, but it was later named ANDREWSFIELD after General Frank Andrews, who unfortunately was killed in a plane crash in Iceland. And as far as I know, it remains the only airfield in the UK named after an individual as opposed to its location. There is a cafeteria there where you can stop and get a bite to eat and a cup of coffee, and it's also a nice place to sit and watch some of the light aircraft take off and land. Talking of which, there's one just flown over, so I'm going to hang around and see if it's coming into land. See, there's a big T hangar over there which is still there from the original site, but all of the original runways have gone. As you can see from the windsock, it's quite a windy day today, so I might struggle with the microphone a little bit. And the clouds look ominous, but I've been told there's no chance of rain until later on this afternoon. We'll see. So on to the next stop, which is only a short hop from here. So whilst I'm here, I can give you a little bit of a chat about the bike as well. So the Tiger 900 Pro is the top of the range Tiger in their road focused version. It retails at £12,800 and it is absolutely chock-a-block with pretty much everything you can throw at it. One of the most standout things is this huge 7-inch TFT screen, a bit like riding with a iPad in front of you, but it's been very useful. It's a really good screen. If I try to talk through it all now, it's going to get really complicated and probably a little bit boring. So now I've got some back roads to get to our next location, and I'll see you when we're there. Now I know this is not an airfield, it is a site of interest because this is the location where a flying fortress by the name of Dry Gulcher crashed in August 1944. It took off from RIDGEWELL Airfield, which is a place that we're going to a little bit later on, came into difficulties and ended up crashing behind SHALFORD Church. All of the crew managed to parachute to safety, with the exception sadly of the tail gunner, Staff Sergeant Norris, who very sadly lost his life in the crash. It's behind this church that the plane crashed, and if you imagine the size of a B-17 Flying Fortress, it would have been quite an event, particularly for a sleepy village like this in Essex. It is a lovely old church, but I won't go and visit it. We'll save that maybe for another video. What a beautiful little avenue. Okay, so we're now again just then a very short hop onto our next location, which is a World War II airfield and actually is still an active MOD airfield. Now this isn't the quickest way because I could have carried on straight up that road, but it's part of the route to make this an interesting ride. So there'll be lots of little diversions, and as you can see we had a horrendous day of rain yesterday. So I'm gonna get this bike pretty muddy, I think. I remember this lane. This could be a little bit interesting on the basis that I've got road tyres on, but we'll see. If I drop it, it's not my bike. But all of these routes have been picked using the TomTom Rider 550 and using their twisty, it's not a twisty route, what do they call it? It's not as bad as I thought down here. It is normally, this time of year, absolutely covered in water, so I've got away with that. Although I think we've got a lower piece to get to yet. Me and my twisty routes. But you do come across some beautiful houses like this. If I stick to these sort of roads, by the time I finish the route I may well be doing it in darkness. But what a wonderful way to spend a day. So I'm now at the next site, but I can't actually film on the site itself because it is still an active MOD site, and this is Wethersfield Airfield, which is at some distance in the background over there. It was built in 1942 for the RAF, but then was used by the US 9th Air Force during World War II. During its time in use in World War II, 81 Dakotas flew from here to take part in the Battle of the Rhine. And then in the 50s it was used exclusively by the US Air Force. As I say, it's still an MOD active site now. There is training that goes on there. I have actually been in there myself. There is a motorcycle school that do training out on the back of one of the runways. And it's quite an interesting site to get in there, but obviously I can't go in there now. There is also an airfield museum on site, and that is open on request. I didn't get a chance to do that for today because I'm literally working with a weather window, so I didn't have time to pre-arrange that, but I'll put a link in the description down below so you can go and have a look at that, and hopefully in a future video I'll get a chance to come back. One of the interesting things about this place is that at one time it did have the longest runway in the UK. They used to fly Super Sabres out of here, and that meant that the original runway had to be extended so that it was just over 2 miles long, and that remained the longest runway in the UK for quite some time. And most of the runway is still intact. You can see from the aerial photographs what it was like, but this is by far and away one of the biggest sites in this region. So I'm now going to hit the road to our next location, which I've already mentioned before. It's Ridgewell, so it's the site where the Dry Gulcher Flying Fortress took off before its unfortunate crash. And it is, and I've missed a turning already. It's an interesting place. There is a very interesting story, but we'll talk about that when we get there. I'm now standing at one of the perimeter roads for our next site, which is RAF Ridgewell. It is now a gliding club. There's a grass strip here. That's all that's left really of the site. There was originally 3 concrete runways here. I think there was 36 pan hard standings as well as 2 T2 hangars. There's a couple of interesting stories about this site, so I'll head around to a memorial. I can't actually get in here at the moment, so I'll head around to where there's a memorial and tell you those stories. We're kind of riding around one of the old perimeter roads of the airfield. As I say, it was quite a big airfield. They run a lot of missions here, and it was a satellite to RAF Stradisel. They have forecast rain, I think, for about 2 o'clock, but and then fingers crossed it will hold off. So we're now at the memorial, which is just behind me here. I'll go and show you that here. You can see what's left of the airfield behind me, and actually there are some gliders out today, so we might see some of that going on. This was an important site, and like all but one of the sites that I'm visiting today, they were where bombers flew from, and they used to again fly B-17 bombers from this site here. So this memorial is not only here to commemorate the servicemen that served from here, but there was, as I say, in June 1943 a terrible accident whilst they were loading bombs onto a B-17. One of those bombs exploded. It was quite a catastrophic event, and sadly 24 people lost their lives on this site, which I think potentially is still the largest loss of American lives on British soil in wartime. And unfortunately, one of those people that was killed was also a local man who was cycling down one of these lanes to work and was hit by shrapnel from the blast, and was also unfortunately killed. So quite a tragic story, but there is also a really heartwarming story from this site. I'll put a link to this story down in the credits because it is very interesting, but the local farmer that owns this land is a bit of a metal detecting fan, and whilst out one day on the fields he came across a ring, and it was a college graduation ring. Through a little bit of detective work he managed to track down the college. He could work out from the dates on the ring the year of that graduation, and going through that list of students that graduated, he found one person that served at this airfield, a guy by the name of Ken Spatz. And miraculously, through the marvels of the internet, he managed to track down a member of Ken's family and was able to reunite his, I think it was his son or his grandson, with the ring that had been worn. And the person actually made the trip over from the US to visit this site, and the ring was presented to him. So a really nice story to follow on from what was a sad story from World War II. Well, there's a stroke of luck. I stopped at the memorial over there, and some of the gliding club are here getting some flights in because the weather is very good for it today, and they invited me in to have a look around, watch a glider taking off. And watch a glider landing. So that was a nice little stop. Nice bunch of guys there, very kind of them to let me come onto the site and watch some of the gliding. So if you're ever out this way, I think it is, maybe not so much during the winter, I think it's Tuesdays and Thursdays as well as the weekend that they fly. Now I've got a bit of a trek to the next site, so I'll show you some sites along the way. I will talk a little bit about the bike. So we've got the new 888cc engine, which we've talked about. The bike has had weight shaved off of it, so it now weighs 192 kilos dry. And on the road going version, the seat is adjustable between 810 and 830 millimeters, so a nice low accessible seat height. And the tank, which does seem to sit lower than I remember on my old 800, they have moved this engine 40 millimeters forward and 20 millimeters lower, and this 20-litre tank gives you a really good range, but the massive TFT screen is telling me that my fuel is low and I've only got 37 miles of range left. So I'm going to go and find a garage. I'm also going to find some lunch to put in my top box, and then I'll see you at the next location. So I've managed to fill up with fuel and filled myself up with a petrol station chicken sandwich, and I'm now here at RAF BOTTISHAM. Now this originally was a satellite airfield built in 1940, and it was a grass strip. The grass strip was reinforced with army tracks, and then later Summerfield steel mesh was used. It never became a fully concrete strip. The difference with this one to some of the other places that I've visited en route is that they actually flew fighters from here. So originally it was an RAF site, and then I think it was in 43 they handed it over to the US Air Force, who were flying Thunderbolts. They then switched to P-51 Mustangs, and because of the range that they had, they were one of the few fighter squadrons that were based in this part of the world. This obviously fell into disrepair, but over the last few years it's gone into private ownership, and they are slowly restoring it, and there's a really fantastic little museum here. Now last time I visited this place, they were rebuilding the cockpit of a P-51 Mustang, and there it is. It's taken them a hell of a long time. They're collecting parts from all over the world, but gradually they're going to restore it. And as ever with these sort of places, there's always interesting stuff to see. So if you are out this way, then BOTTISHAM Airfield Museum is definitely worth a visit. Great little museum. Just a shame actually the owner is going to be around a little bit later on, but just not there at the moment. My timing's gone awry because I really should have been at my next destination, but stopping to chat to the guys at the gliding club has put me back a little bit. So I've now got quite a trek up to the next spot, and I've got a bit of time to make up, so I'll do that. Again, I'll show you from this camera some of those views of the route as we go, and I'll see you at our next destination, which is a working US Air Force airbase. So the next location that you can see behind me is RAF Lakenheath, which is a current active US Air Force base, but it was originally an RAF base opened in 1941, where they used to fly Wellington bombers. By 1942, number 149 Squadron were flying Sterling Mark IIs in bombing raids over Europe from this site too. Then in 1943 they were joined by 199 Squadron, also flying Wellingtons, who later switched to short Sterlings. One of 199 Squadron's most famous raids was in Peenemünde. I probably haven't pronounced that right. And in that raid they demolished what was essentially the German V2 missile bases, thus saving quite a lot of lives in the UK from the terror that was the V2 Doodlebug. The RAF left the site in 1948 to make way for the Americans and their B-52 bombers, and it has been an American base ever since. The site's been responsible for lots of missions into the Middle East and into Europe over the years, and they're now flying, I believe, F-15s from this particular site. Apparently there was 7 F-15s that took off about 2:30, so about 2 hours ago, so they are probably due back. But as I say, as time is moving on and I've got other sites to visit, I can't hang around, but I'll definitely come back here. There's not much more I can talk to you about the bike itself really. There will be a standalone review for it. There'll also be a standalone review for this suit, but I have to say I've been really impressed with it. It's a resurgence of the Wolf brand, well known and well loved by riders
This Fortitude is one of their new laminate suits, so we've got a membrane behind the outer coating, and the idea is that the water doesn't soak in, it just runs off. But obviously you know what laminate suits are all about. I like the fact that it's got this sort of flap that you can pull up and access the vent. So it hit 15 degrees at one point today, which meant that I was able to open the vents on the jacket, and it's got the same style on the trousers. The thing that's different about this is it's got a wool lining, so the thermal liner that's inside it is natural wool. The idea is that that keeps you warm when things get cold, but it also helps you to keep cool. So having those vents open and getting the air blowing through, that wool also helps you breathe. And I have to say, it's an incredibly comfortable suit. It comes with D3O armour. It's just a pleasure to wear, and I think it's actually a quite nice looking suit as well. So I'm now moving on to the next site, and again I'll give you a few flashes of video from this camera here, and we'll see you when we get there.
And I'm at the next stop, which is ROUGHAM Airfield. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Somebody's gonna correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't got a lot of stories about this one, but this still does have a control tower, and there's a museum here. And I've managed to get into the car park, so let's go and have a look and see if there's anybody around. Well, we're in luck because this place is open, so let's have a look around. Bits and pieces that they've dug up. Great little museum, well worth a look, very authentic. What a fabulous little place. If you get a chance to come to ROUGHAM Airfield, then come and have a look around. It's free to enter, but they do take donations, so I'm going to shove something in the pot on the way out. So the sun is getting low, I'm running out of time, but let's try and get to the last destination. I'm not quite sure what's going to be there and whether we'll see anything, but it will at least finish off the riding route, and we'll see what we can come up with. So that was ROUGHAM, really interesting little place that. As you can see, the sun is getting low. I'm going to have to chase the sun to get to our next destination. And as I say, all of the links to these sites and the museums and everything else will be in the description. And I will find somewhere to put the GPX files as well, so you can download those onto your own device and follow the route if you like. The battery in this packed up, and so I've managed to plug it in so I can continue to film with this side camera. Sadly, the second battery on the Hero 8 has just packed up, so I've lost that footage unfortunately. I might swap for the 9, but we are really heading to our last destination, so I'm pretty sure you can make do with footage from the Senna. This is a fantastic bike. I think if you're looking for a mid-size adventure bike, then it's definitely worth giving one of these a go, particularly if you've got no off-road aspirations and you're going to be sticking to the tarmac. The GT Pro is absolutely fantastic, and I just want to thank Triumph for giving me the opportunity to spend some time on it, bring you a review of it, and also enable me to be able to use it for this episode 2 of Tony's Tiny Tours. Well, I did make it to the final destination, and that is BOXTED Airfield. Unfortunately, it is closed. Again, a very key airfield. There is actually the site, I think, of a Lancaster bomber that crashed here as well. Now, I think it looks much lighter on the screen than it actually is here. There's not really anything I can show you. You can have a sneak over the fence. So what I'll do is make my way home for a well-deserved beer. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon. And there you go, just to prove that it is dark. I don't think this camera's going to pick anything up. Right, now for a boring slog down the A12 to get home in time for tea.